The sky wept as if mourning a lost soul, dark clouds unleashing their fury across the Colorado plains. Samuel Winters pulled his hat lower, squinting through the sheets of rain that battered his weathered face. The crack of lightning illuminated the vast emptiness around him, but it was another sound that made his blood run cold. A woman's scream, desperate and terrified, carried on the howling wind. Samuel dug his spurs into his stallion's sides, urging the loyal beast forward despite the animal's reluctance to charge into the heart of the storm. The year was 1879, and in these untamed lands, a cry for help often went unanswered. Not today, not on his watch. The scream came again, clearer this time as he crested a small rise. In the valley below, Samuel spotted a lone figure huddled beneath a lightning-struck tree, arms wrapped around herself as if that might shield her from nature's wrath. "Hold on," he shouted, though his voice was swallowed by the tempest. The woman's head snapped up at his approach, fear evident even through the curtain of rain. Her dress, once fine by the looks of it, clung to her trembling form, soaked through and mudded. She had the appearance of someone who had traveled far and suffered greatly for it. Samuel dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots sinking into mud as he approached her with measured steps. "Miss, are you hurt?" "They took everything," she gasped, teeth chattering. "My wagon, my supplies." "Everything?" Samuel removed his duster and wrapped it around her shoulders. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 25, with striking features despite her bedraggled state. Her auburn hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her eyes, green as spring grass, were wide with lingering terror. "Who did?" he asked, helping her to stand. "3 men, came out of nowhere, said they'd been watching me since Fort Collins." She clutched the coat tighter. "I ran when they tried to." She couldn't finish. Samuel understood without her having to say more. His jaw tightened. "What's your name, miss?" Rebecca Osborne. "Miss Osborne, I'm Samuel Winters." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Night's coming fast, and this storm ain't letting up. My cabin's about 2 miles east. Not much, but it's dry and safe." Rebecca hesitated, weighing her limited options. "I know you've got no reason to trust me," Samuel said softly, "but I give you my word as a man who still believes that means something. You'll come to no harm under my protection." Another crack of lightning made her decision for her. Rebecca nodded, and Samuel helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. As they rode through the deluge, Samuel felt her trembling against him. "You'll never call for help alone again," he promised, his voice low but determined. "Not while I draw breath." Rebecca didn't respond, but she relaxed slightly against him. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a beginning. The cabin appeared like a mirage through the rain, small but sturdily built. Samuel had constructed it himself 3 years prior after leaving behind a life he rarely spoke of. He helped Rebecca dismount and led her inside while lightning continued to fracture the sky. "Sit by the stove," he instructed, lighting a lamp. "I'll tend to my horse and be back." When he returned, soaked to the bone, Rebecca was still standing where he'd left her, as if afraid to move. The cabin was simple, one main room with a stove, table, 2 chairs, and a bed in the corner. A small shelf held a few books, and tools hung from pegs on the wall. It was the home of a man who lived alone and expected to keep doing so. "You can take the bed," Samuel said, hanging his hat on a hook. "I'll sleep by the stove." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," he interrupted firmly but not unkindly. "You've had a harder day than most. Rest is what you need." Samuel busied himself stoking the fire in the stove and setting a pot of coffee to boil. He moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to fending for himself. "Are you hungry?" he asked, not looking up. "Yes," Rebecca admitted. "I haven't eaten since morning." Samuel nodded and reached for a tin of beans and some salt pork. "It's not fancy, but it'll fill your belly." As he cooked, Rebecca finally settled into one of the wooden chairs. "Are you a rancher, Mr. Winters?" "Just Samuel," he corrected. "And no, not exactly. I trap, hunt, do odd jobs when needed, keep to myself mostly." He glanced at her. "What brings a lady like yourself out here alone?" Rebecca's gaze dropped to her hands. "I'm heading to Colorado City. My uncle owns a mercantile there. After my parents died of the fever last winter, he's all the family I have left." Samuel nodded, understanding loss without needing elaboration. Colorado City's still a good 40 miles southwest, bad country between here and there for a woman alone. I didn't start alone, Rebecca said quietly. I had hired a driver in Denver, but he took ill 3 days ago, died suddenly. I had no choice but to continue on my own. Samuel placed a plate of beans and pork before her along with a tin cup of coffee. Eat, we can talk more after. Rebecca ate with restrained hunger, clearly famished but unwilling to appear unladylike. When she'd finished, Samuel took her plate and refilled her coffee. Thank you, she said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along. Samuel's expression darkened. There's still the matter of the men who robbed you. Thieves don't often change their hunting grounds quick. You're not thinking of going after them. Alarm tinged her voice. Not tonight, he assured her. But the law should know. There's a settlement about 10 miles from here with a deputy. Tomorrow, weather permitting, we'll go there, then I'll see you safely to Colorado City. I couldn't ask that of you. You didn't ask, Samuel pointed out. I offered. Outside, the storm continued its assault, rain hammering the roof like desperate fists. Rebecca shivered despite the warmth of the stove. Here, Samuel said, retrieving a worn but clean shirt and trousers from a trunk. They'll be big on you, but they're dry. You can change behind that screen. He nodded to a wooden divider in the corner. When Rebecca emerged, Samuel's clothes hanging loosely on her frame, he was spreading a bedroll near the stove. She hesitated, then asked, May I know something about you, Samuel? I feel at a disadvantage, you knowing my situation while I know nothing of yours. Samuel sat on his bedroll, considering her request. Few people asked about his past and fewer still received answers, but something in Rebecca's direct gaze compelled honesty. I was a lawman once, he said finally. In Kansas. Didn't much care for what the job turned me into, came west 5 years ago, been on my own since. And before that, his expression closed like a door being shut. That's a story for another time, Miss Osborne. You should rest now. Rebecca wanted to press further but recognized the finality in his tone. She nodded and moved to the bed, surprised by its comfort. Good night, Samuel, and thank you again. Good night, he replied, lying down on his bedroll and tipping his hat over his eyes. Rebecca lay awake long after Samuel's breathing had deepened into sleep. The storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, she felt safe for the first time in days. She studied her rescuer in the dim light of the banked stove. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and tall, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His hair, dark brown with threads of silver at the temples, curled slightly where it met his collar. He had kept his beard neatly trimmed, unusual for men living in isolation. What struck her most were his eyes gray as the storm clouds but capable of warming when he spoke gently to her. They were the eyes of a man who had seen much, perhaps too much, yet retained his humanity. Rebecca turned toward the wall, pulling the blanket tighter. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, at least, she could sleep without fear. Dawn arrived with unexpected clarity, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, falling across Rebecca's face and waking her. For a moment she was disoriented, then the events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness. She sat up to find the cabin empty, though the coffee pot bubbled on the stove and a plate of biscuits sat on the table with a note. Gone to check the area. Back soon. Help yourself to breakfast. SW. Rebecca, dressed in her own clothes, now dry though still stained, and was pouring coffee when the door opened. Samuel entered, his expression troubled. Found your wagon, he said without preamble. About 3 miles north. They took the horses and anything of value, but I salvaged what I could. He placed a small bundle on the table, some clothes, a book, and this. He held out a silver locket. Rebecca gasped and took it, clutching it to her chest. My mother's, she explained, blinking back tears. It contains her likeness and my father's. I thought it lost forever. Samuel nodded, understanding its value went beyond the silver it was made from. I tracked them some. 3 men heading west, experienced riders. Rebecca paled. Do you think they'll come back? Not likely, Samuel said, pouring himself coffee. Men like that prefer easy targets. Once they realize you survived and might identify them, they'll keep moving. He sat across from her. We should start for Mill Creek soon. Deputy there's a decent sort, he'll want a description. Rebecca nodded, then hesitated. My clothes, they're hardly presentable. Samuel assessed her dress with its torn hem and mud stains. There's a widow in Mill Creek, Mrs. Peterson, does laundry and mending. We can ask if she has something suitable you might purchase. I have no money, Rebecca admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. They took everything. Samuel waved off her concern. I've got funds. Consider it a loan until you reach your uncle. You're very kind, Mr. Winters, Samuel, he corrected again, and kindness has little to do with it. Just doing what's right. They ate quickly, and Samuel packed provisions for the journey. Before leaving, he retrieved a Winchester rifle from beside the door and checked its action. Can you shoot? He asked Rebecca. My father taught me. Not well, but I can hit what I aim at if it isn't moving too fast. Samuel nodded approvingly and handed her a revolver. Keep this with you. Hopefully you won't need it. Rebecca accepted the weapon, her grip firm. Samuel noted that despite her refined appearance, there was steel beneath her surface, a quality that would serve her well in these territories. They set out with Rebecca riding Samuel's horse while he walked alongside, leading the animal. The day was clear but cool, the storm having washed the world clean. Prairie wildflowers dotted the landscape, their vibrant colors stark against the green-gold grass. It's beautiful, Rebecca said, taking in the expansive view, so different from Pennsylvania. You're from the East, then? Samuel asked, Philadelphia. My father was a professor at the university there. When he died, there was little left for me. My mother's brother in Colorado City wrote offering me a home and work in his store. Long way to travel alone. I had little choice, Rebecca said simply. And I've always believed in facing challenges head-on, though I admit yesterday tested that philosophy. Samuel glanced up at her, a hint of admiration in his expression. Most women would have broken down completely after what you endured. Would breaking down have helped my situation? Rebecca asked pragmatically. No, Samuel conceded with a small smile. I suppose it wouldn't have. They continued in comfortable silence for a time, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a steady backdrop to their journey. Around midday, they stopped by a creek to rest and water the horse. May I ask you something, Samuel? Rebecca ventured as they shared jerky and dried apples. Samuel looked wary but nodded. You said you were a lawman once. Why did you leave? Samuel was quiet for so long Rebecca thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I shot a man, a boy, really. Couldn't have been more than 17. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes betrayed the pain behind his words. He'd robbed a store, killed the shopkeeper. I tracked him for 2 days. When I caught up, he drew on me. I was faster. Rebecca waited, sensing there was more to the story. Found out later he'd taken the money to buy medicine for his dying mother, Samuel continued. Didn't excuse the killing, but after that the badge felt heavy. Started drinking too much. Decided it was better to remove myself from a position of authority before I did more harm than good. I think it shows great character to recognize when a path no longer serves you or others, Rebecca said quietly. Samuel looked at her with surprise, as if expecting judgment rather than understanding. Most would say I ran from my responsibilities. Did you? Or did you simply choose a different form of responsibility, one to yourself and your own integrity? Samuel studied her thoughtfully. You're not what I expected, Miss Osborne. Rebecca, she corrected with a smile. And what did you expect? Someone more fragile, I suppose. Appearances can be deceiving, Samuel. I may look like a proper Eastern lady, but I've endured my share of hardships. They either break you or forge you into something stronger. And which was it for you? I'm still here, aren't I? Rebecca replied with quiet dignity. Samuel nodded, a new respect dawning in his eyes. That you are. They resumed their journey, the sun climbing high overhead. By mid-afternoon, the first buildings of Mill Creek came into view, a small settlement consisting of a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and scattered houses. Not much to look at, Samuel commented, but the people are decent enough. They stopped first at a small house on the edge of town. A plump, gray-haired woman answered Samuel's knock, her face lighting up with recognition. Samuel Winters, haven't seen you in months. Her curious gaze shifted to Rebecca. Mrs. Peterson, this is Miss Rebecca Osborne. She was robbed yesterday on her way to Colorado City, lost most of her belongings, wondering if you might have some ladies' clothes she could purchase. The widow's expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. Come in, come in. I'm sure we can find something suitable." While Rebecca was fitted with a simple but serviceable dress, Samuel walked to the deputy's office. Deputy Frank Morris was a young man with a serious demeanor that belied his 28 years. 3 men, you say? Morris confirmed, making notes. "And they took everything of value, everything they could carry," Samuel agreed. "Miss Osborne was fortunate to escape with her life." Morris frowned. "Sounds like the same bunch that hit a family outside of Boulder last week, killed the husband when he resisted." He looked up at Samuel. "You planning to escort the lady to Colorado City?" "I am," Morris nodded approvingly. "Good, road's not safe for a woman alone. You staying in town tonight?" Samuel considered. It was already mid-afternoon, too late to reach Colorado City before dark. "Likely." "The lady needs rest. Miller's place has a spare room. His wife'll make sure everything's proper." Samuel thanked him and headed back to Mrs. Peterson's house. He found Rebecca transformed. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her auburn hair, which had been neatly pinned up. Clean and properly attired, her natural beauty was more evident, causing Samuel to pause momentarily in the doorway. "Well," she asked, noting his hesitation, "will I pass inspection? You look." Samuel cleared his throat. "Very proper, Miss Osborne, Mrs." Peterson smiled knowingly between them. "I've packed another dress and some necessities in this bag. Should get you to Colorado City comfortably." Samuel insisted on paying despite Mrs. Peterson's protests. As they walked toward Miller's boarding house, Rebecca said, "You've spent a great deal on my behalf, Samuel. I promise to repay every cent once I reach my uncle." "No rush," Samuel replied. "Your safety is what matters now." They secured lodging for the night, Rebecca in the Miller's guest room and Samuel in the small stable behind the house. After a hearty dinner with the Miller family, during which Rebecca charmed them with stories of Philadelphia, she and Samuel sat on the porch as twilight descended. "We should reach Colorado City by tomorrow evening," Samuel said, lighting his pipe. "Your uncle will be worried." "He doesn't expect me for another week," Rebecca admitted. "I made good time until—" She trailed off, the memory of the attack still fresh. Samuel nodded, understanding. Still, better to arrive early than late. A comfortable silence settled between them. The town was quiet save for distant piano music from the saloon and the occasional burst of laughter. "Will you return to your cabin after?" Rebecca asked finally. "Likely," Samuel said, though he sounded uncertain. "It's home such as it is. Seems a lonely life." Samuel shrugged. "I'm accustomed to solitude. Accustomed to it or hiding in it." Rebecca's directness surprised even herself. Samuel turned to her, pipe halfway to his lips. "That's rather bold, Miss Osborne. Forgive me," she said, not sounding particularly sorry. "I've been told I speak too plainly sometimes. No need for forgiveness, it's refreshing." Samuel puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. "Perhaps there's truth in what you say. After Kansas, I wanted distance from people, their judgments, their expectations. And have you found peace in your isolation?" Samuel considered this. "Peace, no, but a kind of quiet. It's not the same thing." Rebecca nodded slowly. "No, I don't suppose it is." The next morning dawned clear and mild. Samuel had acquired a second horse from Miller, a gentle mare that Rebecca could ride for their journey to Colorado City. They set out early, the townsfolk watching with curious eyes as the solitary trapper and the Eastern lady departed together. The day passed pleasantly as they rode side by side through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of pine. Rebecca proved to be an accomplished rider, sitting her mount with natural grace. "My father believed girls should be as capable as boys," she explained when Samuel commented on her skill. "He taught me to ride, shoot, and fish alongside my brothers." "You have brothers," had, Rebecca corrected quietly. "Two, both lost at Gettysburg." Samuel nodded solemnly. The war had left few families untouched. "My younger brother fell at Antietam. I was in the Pacific Northwest during the war, trapping with my father." It was the most personal information he had volunteered, and Rebecca recognized it as the gift it was. "The world changed so much in those 4 years," she said. "Sometimes I think we're all still finding our way back from it." "Some never do," Samuel replied, "but you seem to have found your path forward." I'm trying, Rebecca said with a small smile. That's all any of us can do, isn't it? Try to build something meaningful from what remains. Samuel studied her with newfound appreciation. This woman had depths he hadn't expected, a resilience born of suffering yet untainted by bitterness. It was rare, especially in these hard lands. They stopped to rest by a small stream around midday. While the horses drank, Rebecca sat on a sun-warmed rock and untied the ribbon from her hair, letting the auburn waves cascade down her back as she combed through them with her fingers. Samuel found himself watching, mesmerized by the simple, intimate gesture. When Rebecca glanced up and caught his gaze, he quickly looked away, busying himself with checking his saddle. "How much farther to Colorado City?" she asked, seemingly unaware of his discomfort. "About 15 miles, Samuel replied, grateful for the neutral topic. "We'll be there before sundown." Rebecca nodded, retying her hair. "I'm both anxious and nervous to arrive. I haven't seen my uncle in many years. What if he's changed? What if I'm not what he expects?" "He offered you a home," Samuel reminded her. "That says something about his character." "Yes, I suppose it does." Rebecca stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "We should continue." As they rode, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. Samuel eyed them with concern. "Looks like another storm building. We should try to outpace it." They increased their pace, but the storm moved faster. By mid-afternoon, they could hear distant thunder, and the wind had picked up considerably. "There's an old way station about 3 miles ahead," Samuel called over the rising wind. "We might need to shelter there." Rebecca nodded, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the temperature dropped. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as the station came into view, a low, sturdy building that had once served as a stop for stage coaches before the railroad made the route obsolete. They dismounted quickly and led the horses into the attached lean-to. Inside the main building, Samuel struck a match to light a lantern he found hanging by the door. The station was dusty but intact, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with benches and several bunks built into the wall. "It's not the Mill Creek boarding house," Samuel apologized, setting to work building a fire. "It's shelter from the storm," Rebecca replied practically. "That makes it a palace at the moment." The rain intensified, drumming on the roof as lightning flashed outside the station's small windows. Samuel got a fire going, its warm light creating a cozy atmosphere despite the primitive conditions. Rebecca removed her damp shawl and hung it near the fire. "Reminds me of yesterday," she said with a small laugh. "You riding to my rescue in another storm." "Seems to be becoming a habit," Samuel agreed, the corner of his mouth lifting in a rare smile. Rebecca sat on a bench, watching him as he rummaged through his saddlebags. "You're good at it, you know, rescuing people. Just happened to be in the right place." "No," Rebecca shook her head. "It's more than that. You could have ridden past, many would have, but you didn't." She paused. "I think perhaps you're a better man than you give yourself credit for, Samuel Winters." Samuel looked uncomfortable with her praise. "Don't go making me into something I'm not. I've made my share of mistakes." "Haven't we all?" Rebecca asked softly. "The question is whether we learn from them." Samuel set a tin of beans on the fire to heat. "You're rather wise for someone so young." "I'm 26, Rebecca corrected. "Hardly a child, and wisdom comes from experience, not years." "Fair point," Samuel conceded. He hesitated, then asked, "Were you ever married back east?" Rebecca looked surprised by the question. "No, there was someone once before the war. He didn't return." She smoothed her skirt. "After that, I was too busy caring for my parents to consider it. And you?" Samuel's expression darkened briefly. "Once, long ago." When he didn't elaborate, Rebecca gently prompted, "What happened?" Samuel stirred the beans, seemingly focused on the task. "She died. Fever took her and our infant son while I was away on a marshal's assignment." "I'm so sorry," Rebecca whispered. "It was 15 years ago," Samuel said, his tone suggesting the subject was closed. They ate in silence, the storm raging outside. When they had finished, Samuel checked on the horses while Rebecca made up 2 of the bunks with blankets from their packs. "Storm's not letting up," Samuel reported upon his return. "We'll likely be here till morning." Rebecca nodded, sitting by the fire. "At least we're dry and warm." Samuel settled across from her, stretching his long legs toward the hearth. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines of his face. In that moment, he looked younger, less guarded. "Tell me about Colorado City," Rebecca said. "Have you been there often?" "A few times. It's growing fast since the railroad came through." "Decent people, for the most part. Your uncle's store, Osborne Mercantile, it's one of the better establishments. He's well respected." "That's reassuring," Rebecca smiled. "Though I can't help wondering if there's a place for me there. I've always lived in cities. I know little about frontier life." "You've shown more adaptability in the past 2 days than most city folks manage in months," Samuel observed. "You'll do fine." "And what about you, Samuel? Will you always live alone in your cabin?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "I haven't given it much thought," he admitted. "It suits me for now." "But not forever," Samuel studied her curiously. "Why does my future concern you, Miss Osborne?" Rebecca blushed slightly. "I suppose I've come to think of you as a friend. I care what happens to my friends." "Friends?" Samuel repeated, as if testing the word. "It's been some time since I counted anyone as such." "Then I'm honored to be the first in a while," Rebecca said with a warm smile, "and I hope not the last." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a softening, a tentative opening. "You're an unusual woman, Rebecca Osborne." "Is that good or bad?" she asked, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. "Decidedly good," Samuel replied, his voice lower than before. The storm outside seemed to echo the sudden tension in the room, a pleasant tension, fraught with possibility. Rebecca became acutely aware of how alone they were, how intimate the small space felt with just the two of them. Samuel must have sensed it too, for he abruptly stood. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Rebecca nodded, disappointed yet understanding. "Good night, Samuel." "Good night," he replied, retreating to his bunk across the room. Rebecca lay awake long after Samuel's breathing had deepened into sleep. The storm continued its assault, but her thoughts were more tumultuous. In the span of 2 days, this quiet, honorable man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Tomorrow they would reach Colorado City, and Samuel would return to his solitary life. The thought left her with an unexpected hollow feeling. She turned toward the wall, pulling the rough blanket closer. Tomorrow would come regardless of her confused emotions, better to face it well rested. Morning arrived with gentle sunshine filtering through the station's dusty windows. Rebecca woke to find Samuel already up, tending the horses. She quickly tidied herself, using water from her canteen to wash her face and hands before repinning her hair. When Samuel returned, he seemed more reserved than the previous evening, his walls firmly back in place. "Storms past," he reported. "Roads will be muddy but passable. We should reach Colorado City by early afternoon." They ate a sparse breakfast of hardtack and dried fruit before setting out. The landscape glistened in the aftermath of the storm, wildflowers lifting their heads to the sun. Under different circumstances, it would have been a glorious morning. As they rode, Rebecca tried to recapture the easy conversation of the previous day, but Samuel responded with increasingly brief answers. The closer they got to Colorado City, the more distant he became. Finally, Rebecca confronted him. "Have I offended you somehow, Samuel?" He looked genuinely surprised. "No, why would you think that? You've hardly spoken 10 words together all morning." Samuel sighed, adjusting his hat. "Just thinking is all. Getting you safely to your destination was my purpose. It's nearly accomplished. And that troubles you." Samuel's gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's best this way. You'll start your new life. I'll return to mine." "It doesn't have to be so final," Rebecca ventured. "Colorado City isn't so far from your cabin. You could visit." "To what end, Miss Osborne?" The formality stung more than his words. "Friendship for one," Rebecca replied, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "Or is that too much to ask of the solitary Mr. Winters?" Samuel's expression softened slightly. "It's not that. You're a fine woman, Rebecca. Educated, cultured, you'll make a place for yourself in Colorado City. Find a suitable husband, raise a family. My occasional presence would only complicate matters." "Shouldn't that be my decision?" Rebecca challenged. "Or do you presume to know what's best for me after 2 days' acquaintance?" Samuel looked taken aback by her directness. Before he could respond, The first buildings of Colorado City came into view around a bend in the road. The conversation was effectively ended as Rebecca's attention turned to her new home. Colorado City, in 1879, was a town in transition, part frontier outpost, part emerging city. The arrival of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad 2 years prior had transformed the settlement, bringing new businesses and residents. The main street boasted several substantial brick buildings alongside older wooden structures. People bustled about their business, the sidewalks busy despite the muddy conditions. Samuel guided them toward a large storefront with Osborne Mercantile painted in gold letters across its wide windows. A bell jingled as they entered, announcing their arrival to the tall, distinguished-looking man arranging goods on a shelf. "Be right with you," he called without turning. "Uncle Howard," Rebecca said tentatively. The man spun around, his expression transforming from polite interest to astonishment. "Rebecca, good heavens, we weren't expecting you for another week at least," he hurried forward, embracing her warmly. "My dear girl, look at you, you're the image of your mother." Howard Osborne was in his 50s, with the same auburn hair as Rebecca, though liberally streaked with gray. His eyes the same vivid green as hers, crinkled with genuine pleasure at her arrival. Rebecca returned his embrace, tears of relief threatening to spill. "It's so good to see you, Uncle." Howard held her at arm's length, examining her. "You've had a journey by the looks of it. And who's this?" He glanced at Samuel, who stood awkwardly by the door. "This is Samuel Winters," Rebecca explained. "He saved my life 2 days ago when I was attacked by robbers on the road from Fort Collins." Howard's expression grew serious. "Attacked? My God, Rebecca." He turned to Samuel, extending his hand. "Mr. Winters, it appears I owe you a tremendous debt." Samuel shook his hand briefly. "No debt, Mr. Osborne. Anyone would have done the same." "I very much doubt that," Howard replied. "Please, you must join us for dinner. My wife will want to thank you properly." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "That's kind but unnecessary. I should be getting back." Rebecca felt a pang of disappointment, though she'd anticipated his response. "Samuel, please, at least stay for a meal. You've ridden all this way." Something in her expression must have reached him, for after a moment's hesitation, Samuel nodded. "1 meal, then I'll be on my way." Howard beamed. "Excellent. Let me close up shop early. Rebecca, you must be exhausted. We'll go home straight away so you can rest before dinner." The Osborne home was a handsome 2-story house on a tree-lined street near the center of town. Rebecca was warmly welcomed by her Aunt Martha, a plump, cheerful woman who fussed over her travel-worn appearance and immediately set about preparing a bath and fresh clothes. Samuel declined similar comforts, preferring to see to the horses and his own basic needs. He felt increasingly out of place in this civilized setting, aware of his rough appearance and manners compared to the Osbornes' genteel household. By dinner time, Rebecca had been transformed. She descended the stairs in a becoming dark green dress that enhanced her coloring, her hair arranged in an elegant style. Samuel, who had done his best to clean up but still looked very much the frontier trapper, stared despite himself. Dinner was a lively affair, with Howard and Martha eager to hear about Rebecca's journey. She related her experiences, emphasizing Samuel's heroism in rescuing her during the storm. Throughout the meal, Samuel said little, responding politely when addressed but otherwise keeping his own counsel. As the evening drew to a close, Samuel rose from the table. "I appreciate your hospitality, but I should find lodging for the night. I'll be heading back at first light." Howard would hear nothing of it. "Nonsense, we have a perfectly good guest room. I insist you stay the night." Seeing Samuel about to refuse again, Rebecca interjected, "Please, Samuel, it's the least we can offer after everything you've done." Samuel looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. After a moment, he nodded. "Thank you, just for tonight." Later, as Martha showed him to the guest room, Rebecca lingered in the hallway. When her aunt had gone, she approached Samuel's door and knocked softly. "Yes," he called. Rebecca entered to find him standing by the window, looking out at the darkened town. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. "Not just for the rescue, but for seeing me safely here." Samuel turned to face her. "You're where you belong now, with family. It's good." "Yes," Rebecca agreed, though with less enthusiasm than he might have expected. She hesitated, then asked, "Will I see you again before you leave in the morning?" "Likely not. Best to be on the road early." Rebecca nodded, disappointment evident despite her attempt to hide it. "Then I wish you safe travels, Samuel." She moved closer, gathering her courage. "And I meant what I said earlier. If you ever find yourself in Colorado City again, you would be welcome. By my family and, especially by me." Samuel's expression softened. Rebecca, whatever he might have said was interrupted by a knock at the open door. Howard stood there, a decanter and 2 glasses in hand. "Thought our hero might enjoy a nightcap," he announced cheerfully. Rebecca stepped back, the moment broken. "Good night, gentlemen," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Uncle, don't keep Mr. Winters up too late. He has an early start tomorrow." After she had gone, Howard poured 2 generous measures of whiskey. "Fine girl, my niece," he commented, handing Samuel a glass. "Her parents did well by her." "She's a remarkable woman," Samuel agreed. Howard studied him over the rim of his glass. "You know, Mr. Winters, Colorado City is a growing community. Always need good men with skills like yours. Ever considered settling somewhere more populated?" Samuel sipped his whiskey. "Can't say that I have. Might be worth thinking about," Howard suggested mildly. "A man shouldn't spend his whole life alone." Samuel made no reply, but after Howard had bidden him good night, he stood at the window for a long time, his thoughts more turbulent than he cared to admit. True to his word, Samuel was gone before the household awoke the next morning, leaving only a brief note thanking the Osbornes for their hospitality. Rebecca found herself staring at his masculine scrawl, trying to glean some deeper meaning from the simple words. "He's gone, then?" Howard asked, finding her in the parlor with the note clutched in her hand. "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, setting the paper aside with forced casualness. "Back to his cabin, I presume." Howard studied his niece thoughtfully. "You admire him greatly." "He saved my life," Rebecca replied, avoiding her uncle's perceptive gaze. "Indeed." Howard sat beside her. "Rebecca, I've arranged a position for you in the store as we discussed in our letters, but I want you to know that you're under no obligation." "If you'd prefer to pursue other interests, no," Rebecca interrupted. "I want to work, Uncle Howard. I need purpose, routine. It will help me adjust to my new home." Howard nodded approvingly. "You can start whenever you feel ready. No rush." Rebecca chose to begin the very next day, throwing herself into learning the business with an intensity that surprised even herself. She proved to have a natural aptitude for commerce, quickly mastering the inventory and accounting systems. Her Eastern education and refined manners impressed the store's more prosperous customers, while her lack of pretension endeared her to everyone else. Days stretched into weeks, and Rebecca established a comfortable routine. She worked in the store 6 days a week, attended church on Sundays, and gradually expanded her social circle. Several young men of the town began finding excuses to visit Osborne Mercantile, but Rebecca maintained a friendly distance. "You're becoming quite the favorite," Martha observed one evening as they sat in the parlor, Rebecca with her embroidery and Martha with her knitting. "Daniel Porter asked specifically if you would be attending the town dance next Saturday. Did he?" Rebecca replied absently, her thoughts elsewhere. Martha set down her knitting with a sigh. "Rebecca, dear, it's been nearly 2 months. He's not coming back." Rebecca looked up sharply. "Who? You're Mr. Winters," Martha said gently. "I see how you watch the door every time the bell rings. How your eyes search for him whenever you're out in town." Rebecca's cheeks flushed. "He's not my Mr. Winters, and I harbor no expectations." "Perhaps you should," Martha suggested. "Daniel Porter is the bank manager's son. He's well-educated, handsome, and clearly smitten with you." "Daniel is very nice," Rebecca acknowledged, "but I'm not ready for that." Martha patted her hand understandingly. "Of course, dear, these things take time." As autumn painted the surrounding mountains with gold and crimson, Colorado City prepared for its annual Harvest Festival. The event was the social highlight of the season, drawing people from surrounding settlements for 3 days of celebrations. Rebecca found herself caught up in the excitement, despite her initial reluctance. She helped decorate the town square, baked pies for the contest, and even allowed Martha to convince her to purchase a new dress for the occasion, a russet-colored creation that complemented her hair and brought out the green of her eyes. The festival began on a Friday in early October. The main street was transformed with lanterns and bunting, stalls selling everything from candied apples to handcrafted jewelry. A band played lively tunes in the square, where couples danced on a wooden platform erected for the occasion. Rebecca was arranging a display of ribbons at the Osborne mercantile booth when a familiar voice froze her in place. "Afternoon, Miss Osborne." She turned slowly to find Samuel Winters standing before her. He looked different, his hair trimmed, beard neatly groomed, wearing a clean shirt and waistcoat beneath his usual duster. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, warm with something she hadn't seen there before. "Samuel," she breathed, hardly believing he was real. "You're here." "For the festival," he confirmed, his hat in his hands. "Thought I might see how you were settling in." Rebecca couldn't contain her smile. "I'm well, very well, and you?" "Can't complain." He glanced around at the festive scene. "Town looks prosperous." "It is, we've been busy at the store." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "I've missed our conversations." A ghost of a smile touched Samuel's lips. "Have you now?" Before Rebecca could respond, Howard appeared at her side. "Samuel Winters, what a pleasant surprise." He shook Samuel's hand enthusiastically. "Here for the festival, I take it?" "Yes, sir, just arrived." "Excellent, you must join us for dinner. No arguments this time." Howard clapped him on the shoulder. "Rebecca, why don't you show Samuel around? I can manage here." Rebecca needed no further encouragement. Removing her apron, she stepped from behind the booth. "I'd be happy to, if you're not too tired from your journey." "Not at all," Samuel replied, offering his arm in a gesture that seemed both foreign and natural to him. As they strolled through the festival, Rebecca was acutely aware of the curious glances they attracted. Samuel Winters was unmistakably a man of the frontier, tall, rugged, with an air of quiet danger about him. Beside him, Rebecca in her fashionable dress created a striking contrast. "People are staring," she murmured. "At you," Samuel corrected. "You're the most beautiful woman here." The compliment, delivered in his matter-of-fact way, sent color rushing to Rebecca's cheeks. "That's not true, but thank you." They stopped at various stalls, sampling treats and admiring crafts. Samuel purchased a small silver hairpin for Rebecca, a simple design of leaves and flowers that she immediately secured in her hair. "It suits you," he said approvingly. "It's lovely," Rebecca replied, touching it gently. "Thank you." As they walked, Rebecca gradually drew out the details of Samuel's life since they had parted. He had been trapping in the mountains, done some guiding for a group of eastern hunters, and most recently, helped the army track a band of rustlers who had been stealing from both settlers and the reservation. "The deputy in Mill Creek mentioned you were good at tracking," Rebecca recalled. "It sounds dangerous work." "Can be," Samuel admitted, "but it pays well, and I know the territory better than most." They paused at the edge of the dance platform, watching couples twirl to a lively reel. Rebecca found herself wishing Samuel would ask her to dance, though she suspected such socializing was outside his comfort. To her surprise, he turned to her and said, "Would you care to dance, Miss Osborne? I warn you, I'm not particularly skilled." Rebecca's heart leapt. "I would love to. And I'm sure you dance beautifully." Samuel's laugh was short but genuine. "Your confidence is misplaced but appreciated." He led her onto the platform with surprising grace. When the music began a simple waltz, Samuel proved more competent than he had claimed. His large hand rested properly at her waist, the other holding hers with gentle firmness. "You misled me, Mr. Winters," Rebecca teased as they moved in time to the music. "You dance quite well." "Had a good teacher once," Samuel replied cryptically. They completed 2 dances before Rebecca noticed Daniel Porter watching from the sidelines, his expression displeased. When the music ended, Daniel approached. "Miss Osborne," he greeted her with a tight smile. "I've been looking for you." His gaze slid to Samuel. "Won't you introduce me to your friend?" Rebecca performed the introduction with perfect courtesy, though she sensed the tension between the 2 men immediately. Daniel was everything Samuel was not: refined, educated, and conscious of his social standing. "Mr. Winters saved my life during my journey here," Rebecca explained. He's visiting for the festival. How fortunate for us all, Daniel said with barely concealed insincerity. I believe you promised me a dance, Miss Osborne. Rebecca had made no such promise, but before she could correct him, Samuel stepped back. Don't let me keep you, Miss Osborne. I should find accommodations for the night anyway. Nonsense, Rebecca said firmly. You're staying with us as Uncle Howard insisted. She turned to Daniel. Perhaps another time, Mr. Porter. Mr. Winters and I were just going to get some refreshment. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his upbringing prevented him from making a scene. Of course, another time. He nodded stiffly and withdrew. Samuel raised an eyebrow. I believe you've made an enemy of the bank manager's son on my account. Daniel is harmless, Rebecca dismissed, and presumptuous. Now, I believe I mentioned refreshments. They spent the remainder of the afternoon enjoying the festival. By the time they returned to the Osborne home for dinner, Rebecca felt a lightness she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. Samuel's presence had somehow filled a void she hadn't fully acknowledged. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Howard and Martha drawing Samuel into easy conversation about his various adventures. Rebecca observed that he spoke more freely than during his previous visit, answering questions with less reservation and even occasional humor. After the meal, while Martha and Howard retired to the parlor, Rebecca led Samuel to the small garden behind the house. The evening was cool but not cold, the sky clear and filled with stars. Why did you really come back, Samuel? Rebecca asked once they were alone. Samuel was silent for a long moment, gazing up at the night sky. I told myself it was for the festival. Good opportunity to sell some pelts, stock up on supplies. He looked at her. But that wasn't the truth. What was? Rebecca's heart quickened. I couldn't stop thinking about you, Samuel admitted quietly. Your strength, your kindness, the way you looked at me like I was worth something. You are worth something, Rebecca insisted. So much more than you believe. Samuel stepped closer, his expression serious. Rebecca, I'm not the kind of man someone like you should be thinking about. I have nothing to offer but a hard life in a crude cabin. You deserve better. Shouldn't I be the judge of what I deserve? Rebecca challenged. What I want. And what do you want? Samuel's voice was barely above a whisper. Rebecca took a deep breath. A chance for us to know each other better. No promises, no expectations, just time. Samuel studied her face in the moonlight, his eyes searching. Whatever he saw there must have reassured him, for he nodded slowly. Time, I can offer that much at least. Rebecca smiled, relief and joy mingling. How long will you stay in Colorado City? I'd planned on just the 3 days of the festival, Samuel replied, but perhaps a week wouldn't hurt. A week, Rebecca repeated. We can do a lot of getting acquainted in a week. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the festival's continued celebrations. Samuel accompanied the Osborne family to the town square, where the day's events began with a shooting competition. You should enter, Rebecca urged Samuel as they watched men signing up. I've seen how well you handle a rifle. Samuel looked uncomfortable with the suggestion. Don't much care for showing off. Howard overheard and joined the conversation. It's all in good fun, Winters. Prize is $20 and a new Stetson. Could use a new hat, couldn't you? After further encouragement, Samuel reluctantly added his name to the list. The competition drew a considerable crowd, with most of the town's men and quite a few from outlying areas participating. The targets were set at varying distances, with competitors eliminated after each round. Samuel's quiet confidence and steady hand quickly distinguished him from the more boisterous contestants. By the final round, only he and 3 others remained, including Daniel Porter, who handled his expensive rifle with practiced precision. Gentlemen's sport, shooting, Daniel commented as they waited their turns. Though I suppose for some, it's a necessity rather than recreation. Samuel merely nodded, declining to be baited. When his turn came, he stepped to the line with the same Winchester he had carried during Rebecca's rescue. The target, a small tin can placed on a fence post 100 yards distant, seemed nearly impossible to hit. Samuel took his time, his breathing steady, his focus absolute. When he fired, the can flew from the post in a satisfying arc. The crowd erupted in applause, none louder than Rebecca. Daniel, shooting last, matched the feat with clinical precision. The judge declared a tie, necessitating a more difficult challenge. Two smaller targets were placed, and the men would shoot simultaneously. As they prepared, Daniel said just loudly enough for Samuel to hear, "Miss Osborne seems quite taken with you, Mr. Winters. Curious, given her upbringing and your background." Samuel's expression remained neutral. "Miss Osborne makes her own judgments. For now," Daniel replied smoothly. "But she'll soon realize where she belongs, with civilized people." Before Samuel could respond, the judge called them to ready position. The two men raised their rifles, and at the signal, both fired. Both targets fell, resulting in another tie. The crowd murmured in appreciation of the display of marksmanship. For the final round, the judge proposed something more challenging: shooting at a moving target. A small wooden disc would be thrown into the air, and each man would have one chance to hit it. Daniel went first, his concentration evident as he tracked the disc's arc. His shot clipped the edge, sending splinters flying but not destroying the target completely. A good shot, but not perfect. When Samuel stepped up, the crowd fell silent. The disc was thrown, and in one fluid motion, Samuel raised his rifle, tracked, and fired. The wooden target exploded into fragments. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Samuel accepted the prize with quiet dignity, nodding his thanks to the judge. As he rejoined Rebecca and the Osbornes, he noted Daniel Porter's tight expression. "Remarkable shooting," Howard praised. "Where did you learn such skill?" "My father taught me basics," Samuel replied. "Rest came from necessity. Man doesn't eat if he can't shoot straight in the mountains." The remainder of the day passed pleasantly, with Samuel and Rebecca enjoying the various competitions and entertainments. By evening, they had established a comfortable rapport that felt both new and familiar, as if resuming a conversation long interrupted. The festival's second night featured a grand dance in the newly constructed town hall. Rebecca wore her russet dress, her hair arranged to display Samuel's silver hairpin. When she descended the stairs, Samuel waited at the bottom, looking uncomfortable but handsome in a clean black suit borrowed from Howard. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Rebecca smiled, taking in his transformed appearance. "And you are quite dashing, Mr. Winters." At the dance, Rebecca found herself the object of much attention, both for her own merits and for her unexpected escort. Several of the town's eligible young ladies approached her during the evening, curious about the rugged stranger who had so thoroughly captured her interest. "Is it true he rescued you from bandits?" asked Emma Turner, the doctor's daughter, as they stood near the refreshment table. "Yes," Rebecca confirmed. "He risked his life for a complete stranger." "How romantic," Emma sighed, "though he seems rather intimidating." Rebecca glanced across the room where Samuel stood talking with Howard and several other businessmen. "He can be, I suppose, but he's also kind and honorable." "Daniel Porter is quite put out," Emma confided with a hint of mischief. "He's been telling anyone who'll listen that your Mr. Winters is little more than a savage with a gentleman's veneer." Rebecca's eyes flashed. Daniel should mind his own affairs. Samuel Winters has more genuine character in his little finger than Daniel has in his entire being. Emma looked delighted by this passionate defense. "Well, I think we can all see where your preferences lie, Rebecca Osborne." The orchestra struck up a waltz, and Samuel appeared at Rebecca's side, offering his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Osborne?" Rebecca placed her hand in his without hesitation. "You may indeed, Mr. Winters." As they moved across the floor, Rebecca was aware of many eyes upon them. "You've caused quite a stir in our little community," she told him. "Not my intention," Samuel replied. "Though I can't say I'm sorry if it means dancing with you." Rebecca smiled up at him. "You're becoming quite the smooth talker, Samuel." "Must be the company I'm keeping," he responded, the corner of his mouth lifting in that hint of a smile she had come to treasure. The dance ended too soon, and Daniel Porter immediately approached to claim Rebecca for the next. Propriety demanded she accept, though she did so with limited enthusiasm. As Daniel led her rather stiffly through the steps of a country reel, he said, "You seem quite enchanted with your frontiersman, Rebecca. One hopes it's merely a passing fascination." "Mr. Winters is a friend," Rebecca replied coolly. "A good one, a friend," Daniel repeated skeptically. Is that why you look at him as if he hung the moon? Really, Rebecca, consider your position. Your uncle is one of Colorado City's leading citizens. Your association with a man like Winters reflects poorly on the family. Rebecca's temper flared. My association, as you call it, is my own affair, Mr. Porter, and I'd thank you not to presume to advise me on matters of the heart. Daniel's expression hardened. The heart can be deceived, especially when blinded by romantic notions of frontier heroism. Winters is not one of us. He never will be. Perhaps that's precisely what recommends him, Rebecca retorted as the dance ended. Without waiting for his response, she curtsied briefly and walked away, returning to where Samuel stood watching from the sidelines. Everything all right? He asked, noting her flushed cheeks. Fine, Rebecca assured him, though her voice was tight. Just realizing how narrow-minded some civilized people can be. Samuel's gaze followed Daniel across the room. Porter's not wrong, you know, about me not belonging in your world. Rebecca touched his arm. Don't you start. I've had quite enough of people telling me what's suitable for me today. Samuel studied her face, then nodded slowly. Fair enough, though I can't promise I won't worry about your reputation. My reputation, Rebecca said firmly, will survive association with a hero, regardless of what some may think. The remainder of the evening passed more pleasantly, with Rebecca and Samuel sharing several more dances and enjoying the festive atmosphere. By the time they returned to the Osborne home, Rebecca felt a contentment she hadn't expected to find in her new life. On the porch, as Howard and Martha went inside, Samuel lingered with Rebecca in the moonlight. Thank you for tonight, Rebecca said softly. I can't remember when I've enjoyed myself more. Samuel's expression was serious as he looked down at her. Rebecca, I need to say something. Yes, she prompted when he hesitated. I'm not staying in Colorado City after the festival, he began. My life is what it is, but… He paused, clearly struggling with unfamiliar territory. I'd like to come back from time to time, if that would be welcome. Rebecca's heart soared at this tentative offering. It would be very welcome, Samuel, very welcome indeed, Samuel nodded, relieved. Good, that's good. In the soft glow of the porch lantern, Rebecca saw something in his eyes she hadn't dared hope for, a tenderness, a vulnerability that belied his rugged exterior. Impulsively, she rose on tiptoes and pressed a brief, gentle kiss to his cheek. Good night, Samuel, she whispered before slipping inside, leaving him standing in stunned silence. The final day of the festival dawned with a sense of anticipation and melancholy for Rebecca. Samuel would be leaving the next morning, returning to his cabin in the mountains. Though his promise to visit again gave her hope, she couldn't help feeling that their time together was precious and fleeting. The day's festivities included a pie contest, horse races, and an auction to benefit the new schoolhouse. Rebecca entered one of her apple pies in the contest, while Samuel participated in the shooting exhibition again at Howard's insistence. You're quite the celebrity now, Rebecca teased as they walked through the fairgrounds. The mysterious marksman from the mountains. Samuel looked uncomfortable with the attention. Not used to so many people, prefer the quiet. All of this, Rebecca gestured to the bustling festival, must seem very trivial compared to your life. Different, Samuel corrected. Not trivial, community has its purpose. Rebecca studied him thoughtfully. You know, you could have community too, not necessarily here, but somewhere you don't have to be alone. Samuel didn't respond directly. Instead, he asked, Are you happy here, Rebecca? Truly, the question caught her off guard. Yes, I think so. My aunt and uncle have been wonderfully kind. The work at the store is satisfying. I've made friends. But, Samuel prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, Rebecca sighed. But sometimes I feel as if I'm playing a part. The respectable niece, the proper young lady, there are expectations. Like Daniel Porter, Samuel suggested. Yes, like Daniel, Rebecca agreed. Everyone assumes I'll eventually accept his attentions. It's the sensible match. And is that what you want? Sensible, Rebecca met his gaze directly. No, I want something real, something that matters. Before Samuel could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Howard and several other merchants, eager to involve Samuel in a discussion about trapping territories and fur prices. Rebecca excused herself, using the pie judging as a pretext. The remainder of the day passed in a whirl of activities, with Rebecca and Samuel rarely finding moments alone together. By evening, as the festival concluded with a community supper and final dance, Rebecca felt a growing sense of urgency. There was so much still unsaid between them. During the last waltz of the evening, Samuel held her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I'm leaving at first light," he said quietly. Rebecca nodded, fighting the tightness in her throat. "I know, will you? Will you write to me?" Samuel looked surprised by the request. "I'm not much for letters, never had cause to send them before." "There's always a first time," Rebecca suggested with a small smile. Samuel considered this. "I suppose there is, though don't expect poetry." "I expect only honesty," Rebecca replied. "That's all I've ever wanted from you, Samuel." As the music ended, they remained standing close together, reluctant to break the connection. Finally, Samuel stepped back. "We should join your aunt and uncle. It's getting late." The walk home was subdued, with Howard and Martha tactfully walking ahead to give Rebecca and Samuel some privacy. When they reached the house, Howard invited Samuel to join him for a final nightcap in his study. "Just for a moment," Samuel agreed, glancing at Rebecca. "Then I should turn in. Early start tomorrow." Rebecca nodded, understanding. "I'll say good night then, in case we don't." "In case I don't see you before you leave." Martha discreetly went inside, leaving them alone on the porch. In the gentle glow of the lantern, Samuel looked at Rebecca with an intensity that made her breath catch. "These days," he said slowly, "have meant more to me than you can know." Rebecca swallowed past the lump in her throat. "They've meant a great deal to me as well." Samuel took a step closer. "Rebecca, I'm not a man of many words, never have been, but I want you to know." He paused, seemingly at a loss. "Yes," Rebecca encouraged softly. Instead of answering, Samuel gently cupped her face in his calloused hands. With infinite tenderness, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was both question and answer. Rebecca responded without hesitation, her hands resting lightly on his chest. The kiss was brief but profound, a promise and a revelation. When they parted, Samuel's eyes held a warmth that transformed his features. "That's what I wanted you to know," he said simply. Rebecca smiled up at him, her heart full. "I believe I understand completely." Samuel's thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "I will come back, Rebecca, you have my word." "I'll hold you to that, Samuel Winters." She stepped back reluctantly. "Good night, safe travels tomorrow." Inside the house, Rebecca pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of Samuel's kiss. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she felt truly hopeful about the future. Samuel was gone when Rebecca awoke the next morning, having departed at first light as planned. Howard mentioned at breakfast that Samuel had left something for her, retrieving a small package from his desk. Rebecca unwrapped it to find a small leather-bound journal and a pencil, along with a brief note. "For your thoughts until we meet again. S.W." The gesture touched her deeply. Samuel might not be a man of many words, but he understood her need for expression. That evening, she began writing in the journal, recording not only the events of the day, but also her feelings about Samuel and their growing connection. Days turned into weeks, and autumn gave way to the first hints of winter. Rebecca continued her work at the store, established a routine of volunteer work with the church, and politely but firmly declined Daniel Porter's increasingly persistent attentions. "You're making a mistake," Daniel told her after she had refused yet another dinner invitation. "Winters won't be back. Men like him don't settle down." "Your concern is noted," Rebecca replied coolly, "but my personal affairs remain my own." A month after the festival, the first letter arrived, a brief, somewhat awkwardly written missive from Samuel, describing his return journey and current activities. The handwriting was unpolished but clear, the sentiments genuine if sparsely expressed. Rebecca read it countless times, responding with a longer letter of her own that detailed life in Colorado City and her thoughts about their time together. Thus began a correspondence that sustained her through the early winter months. Samuel's letters arrived irregularly, sometimes weeks apart, but each one revealed a little more of the man behind the rugged exterior. He wrote of his daily life, the beauty of the mountains in winter, and occasionally of his growing feelings for her. "I find myself talking to you even when you're not here," one letter confessed. Foolish, perhaps, but it makes the silence less empty. Rebecca cherished these glimpses into his private thoughts, responding with equal honesty about her own life and emotions. In one letter, she wrote, "I've realized that home isn't necessarily a place. Sometimes it's a feeling, a sense of belonging that comes from connection with another soul. I felt that with you, Samuel." As Christmas approached, Colorado City was transformed with decorations and seasonal cheer. Rebecca threw herself into the preparations, helping to organize the church pageant and holiday market. Yet amid the festivities, she couldn't help wondering if Samuel would fulfill his promise to return. 3 days before Christmas, a heavy snowstorm swept through the region, blanketing the town and making travel nearly impossible. Rebecca stood at the store window, watching the snow fall and trying to quell her disappointment. If Samuel had planned to visit for the holiday, the weather would surely prevent him. The store was empty that afternoon, most people having completed their shopping or chosen to remain home due to the storm. Rebecca was about to close early when the bell above the door jingled, bringing with it a swirl of snow and a tall, familiar figure. "Samuel," she gasped, hardly believing her eyes. He stood just inside the door, snow melting on his duster and hat, his beard frosted with ice. But his eyes were warm as they found hers. "Told you I'd be back," he said simply. Rebecca rushed to him, propriety forgotten as she threw her arms around his neck. Samuel's arms encircled her, lifting her slightly in his enthusiasm. "I thought the storm would keep you away," Rebecca said when he set her down. "Takes more than a little snow to stop me when I've made up my mind." Samuel removed his hat, revealing hair that had grown slightly longer since she'd last seen him. "Though I admit the last 10 miles were challenging." Howard emerged from the back room, his face lighting up at the sight of their visitor. "Samuel Winters, made it through the blizzard, did you? Martha will be delighted. You'll stay with us for Christmas, of course." Samuel glanced at Rebecca, a question in his eyes. At her eager nod, he said, "Thank you, sir, if it's no imposition." "Nonsense," Howard clapped him on the shoulder. "We've plenty of room. Rebecca, why don't you close up early? No one else will be shopping in this weather." The walk to the Osborne home was difficult due to the deep snow, but Rebecca barely noticed the cold with Samuel beside her. At the house, Martha welcomed him warmly, fussing over his chilled state and insisting he sit by the fire while she prepared hot coffee. "You must be frozen to the bone," she chided gently. "What possessed you to travel in such weather?" Samuel's gaze flickered to Rebecca. "Made a promise," he said simply. Martha exchanged a knowing look with Howard. "Well, we're glad you're here. Christmas should be spent with friends." That evening, after a hearty dinner, Rebecca and Samuel found themselves alone in the parlor. Howard and Martha had retired early, citing fatigue but clearly intending to give the young people privacy. "I have something for you," Samuel said, retrieving a small package from his coat pocket. "Not much, but I thought of you when I saw it." Rebecca unwrapped the gift carefully. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet adorned with small turquoise stones. "Oh, Samuel, it's beautiful. Traded for it with a Navajo silversmith," Samuel explained. "The blue reminded me of that dress you wore at the festival dance." Rebecca was touched that he remembered such a detail. "Help me put it on." Samuel's fingers were surprisingly deft as he fastened the bracelet around her wrist. When he finished, his hand lingered on hers. "I have something for you too," Rebecca said, retrieving a package from beneath the Christmas tree. "I wasn't sure when I would be able to give it to you." Samuel unwrapped it to find a fine leather journal, similar to the one he had given her, but of higher quality. Inside, the first page bore an inscription, "For the words you haven't said yet, with affection, Rebecca." Samuel ran his fingers over the smooth leather, clearly moved by the gift. "Thank you. I'll put it to good use." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the fire crackling in the grate, snow falling gently outside the window. Rebecca felt a sense of rightness, of completion, that had been missing during the months of Samuel's absence. "How long can you stay?" she asked finally. "Through New Year's, if that's acceptable to your aunt and uncle," Samuel replied. "I've made arrangements for my traps to be checked by a friend, a week." Rebecca would have a full week with him. The thought filled her with joy. "I'm so glad you're here, Samuel." So am I, he admitted, his voice low. Been thinking about you, a lot. Rebecca's heart quickened at his admission. I've thought about you too, every day. Samuel shifted slightly closer on the sofa. Your letters, they meant a great deal to me. No one's ever written to me before. No one. Samuel shook his head. Never stayed in one place long enough, never had anyone who wanted to stay in touch. The simple statement revealed so much about his solitary existence. Rebecca reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. Well, now you do. Samuel looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. With deliberate slowness, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle meeting of lips that quickly deepened as Rebecca responded eagerly. When they parted, Samuel's eyes held a mixture of wonder and certainty. I think I'm falling in love with you, Rebecca Osborne. The words, spoken plainly without embellishment, filled Rebecca with warmth. I think I've already fallen, Samuel Winters. The admission changed something between them, a barrier dissolved, a future glimpsed. They talked long into the night, sharing hopes and fears, discovering the many ways in which their seemingly different lives had prepared them for each other. The Christmas week passed in a joyful blur. Samuel was warmly welcomed by the Osbornes' friends, though Daniel Porter made his disapproval evident with cold civility. Rebecca found she cared little for his opinion, her happiness too complete to be dimmed by petty jealousy. On Christmas Day, after church and a festive dinner, Samuel asked Rebecca to walk with him despite the cold. Bundled in coats and scarves, they strolled through the snow-covered streets, the town quiet and peaceful under its white blanket. I've been thinking, Samuel said as they paused in the town square, the Christmas tree glittering with ornaments, about what you said about not having to be alone. Rebecca waited, sensing the importance of the moment. I've lived by myself for a long time, Samuel continued. Thought it was what I wanted, what I deserved after Kansas. He looked at her, his expression earnest. But these months knowing you, writing to you, it's changed something in me. What are you saying, Samuel? Rebecca asked, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. I'm saying I don't want to go back to that solitude, not completely. He took her gloved hands in his. I'm asking if you might consider a future with me. Rebecca's eyes widened. Are you proposing, Samuel Winters? Not exactly, not yet. Samuel looked slightly uncomfortable. I know I'm not what your family would have chosen for you. I can't offer much, Samuel, Rebecca interrupted gently. What exactly are you offering? Samuel took a deep breath. Time for us to be sure. I'll come to Colorado City more often, stay longer, maybe find work nearby so we can. See if this is real, if it could last. Rebecca considered his words, understanding the magnitude of what he was suggesting. For a man who had lived in isolation for years, this tentative step toward connection represented enormous change. I think, she said carefully, that sounds like a wonderful beginning. Relief washed over Samuel's features. You do? Yes. Rebecca smiled up at him, her heart full. I don't need promises of forever yet, Samuel. I just need to know you're willing to try. Samuel pulled her close, his arms strong around her. More than willing, he murmured against her hair. For the first time in years, I'm looking forward, not back. In that moment, surrounded by winter's quiet beauty, Rebecca knew with certainty that the storm that had brought Samuel into her life had been not a disaster, but a blessing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. By New Year's Eve, Samuel had secured an agreement with Howard to supply the store with game and furs on a regular basis. He had also spoken with the local marshal about occasional work tracking criminals. His skills were well known after the festival shooting competition. It's not permanent, he explained to Rebecca as they prepared for the town's New Year celebration. But it's a start. I'll still need to return to my cabin sometimes, but I could be here a week or two each month. Rebecca helped him straighten his borrowed tie, her hands lingering on his chest. It's more than I hoped for, Samuel. I understand your need for the wilderness. I wouldn't want to change that part of you. Samuel caught her hands in his. You've changed me in ways that matter, Rebecca, made me remember what it is to care for someone, to look beyond my own regrets. That night, as the town gathered in the square to welcome 1880, Samuel stood tall beside Rebecca, his arm around her waist. When the clock struck midnight and cheers erupted around them, he turned to her with uncharacteristic openness. "Happy New Year, Rebecca," he said, and kissed her for all to see, no longer concerned with others' opinions. Daniel Porter, watching from across the square, finally accepted defeat. The next day, he announced his intention to visit relatives in Denver for an extended period. Through the winter months, Samuel divided his time between his cabin and Colorado City, gradually increasing his periods in town. He rented a small room above the livery stable for these visits, insisting on maintaining propriety despite his growing relationship with Rebecca. By spring, their attachment was well known and generally accepted within the community. Samuel's quiet integrity and willingness to help those in need had won over many who had initially been skeptical of the rough frontiersman. On a warm day in May, Samuel took Rebecca riding outside town to a scenic overlook with views of the mountains he loved. There, among wildflowers and beneath an endless blue sky, he finally asked the question that had been in his heart for months. "Rebecca Osborne," he said, kneeling before her with uncharacteristic formality, "I know I'm not the kind of man your parents might have chosen. I'm rough-edged and set in my ways, but I love you with everything I am. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Yes, Samuel, yes, with all my heart." The ring he placed on her finger was simple but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond, purchased with the proceeds from his winter trapping. Their wedding took place in June, a modest affair in the town church with Howard giving the bride away. Martha wept happy tears, having come to love Samuel like a son in the months of his courtship. After the ceremony, as guests gathered at the Osborne home for the celebration, Samuel pulled his bride aside for a moment of privacy. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression serious. Rebecca looked concerned. "What is it?" "I sold my cabin," Samuel revealed. "Used the money to buy land just outside town, 10 acres with a good stream and plenty of trees." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Samuel, but you loved that place." "I love you more," he replied simply. "Don't worry, it's not too close to town, still plenty of wilderness to satisfy me. But near enough that you can maintain your work at the store and your community activities." Tears threatened again as Rebecca understood the significance of his sacrifice. "You're sure?" "Never been more certain of anything," Samuel assured her. "We'll build a home there. Something simple to start, but we can add to it as needed." "As needed," Rebecca repeated with a smile. Samuel's cheeks reddened slightly. "Well, I thought, that is, if you wanted children someday." Rebecca silenced him with a kiss. "I think that sounds like a wonderful plan, Mr. Winters." Their home was completed by autumn, a sturdy log structure larger than Samuel's previous cabin, with proper windows, a stone fireplace, and separate bedrooms with an eye toward the future family they both wanted. Though modest by town standards, it perfectly blended Samuel's appreciation for simplicity with Rebecca's touches of comfort and beauty. Samuel continued to trap and hunt, but also developed a reputation as the territory's best tracker, often called upon by the marshal to help pursue fugitives. Rebecca maintained her position at the store 3 days a week, using her growing knowledge of business to help expand the enterprise. Their first child, a son they named James Howard Winters, arrived the following summer, a strong, healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Samuel took to fatherhood with surprising ease, his large hands remarkably gentle with the tiny infant. On a stormy night when James was 6 months old, Rebecca woke to find Samuel's side of the bed empty. Following a hunch, she wrapped herself in a shawl and padded to the nursery, where she found her husband standing by the window, their son cradled against his chest. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. Samuel turned, smiling at the sight of her. "Storm woke him. Thought I'd let you rest." Rebecca moved to stand beside them, leaning against Samuel's solid warmth. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, reminiscent of the night they first met. "Reminds me of another storm," Samuel said, echoing her thoughts. "Best thing that ever happened to me, hearing your cry for help that night." Rebecca looked up at him, love swelling in her heart. "Do you ever regret it, giving up your solitude for all this?" Samuel gazed down at their son, then at her, his expression one of absolute certainty. Not for a single moment. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I meant what I said that night, you know. You'll never call for help alone again, not as long as I live. I know, Rebecca whispered, nestling closer. And I never have. As the storm continued its display outside their snug home, the small family stood together in peaceful contentment. Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them here from a desperate cry in a thunderstorm to this moment of perfect belonging. Life would bring its own storms, she knew. But facing them together, they would always find their way to shelter, to home, to each other's hearts.